Thank you, Christian. And hopefully you can hear me. That's a great opportunity to come and to welcome you once again. So a warm welcome from me on behalf of Roche, but rather also on behalf of the whole community. And as Christian said, it's unfortunate that this year it is virtual and not in Basel. So we can't invite you to come and swim in the river and all the other nice things we've done in previous years. But I do hope you're well, given the current situation and wherever you're sitting in the world. And I'm only going to speak for a few minutes here, but there was a couple of things I was thinking to bring at the beginning. So many new people will have joined us this year, perhaps new to the community. So just as a reminder, why are we interested in digital biomarkers? Christian gave that definition, which is very useful. But we're interested because we believe, and now we have evidence to show, we can generate more sensitive, precise, and objective measurements in the clinic. We can measure continuously with longitudinal measurement and capture really episodic events or even very rare events that are occurring with patients or individuals. And together with those, we also are reducing the assessment burden for patients in clinical trials and hopefully gathering data which is even more real world relevant because we're measuring what people are doing in their normal daily lives and not only in the rather artificial situation of a clinical assessment, although both clearly are very important. And Christian also mentioned this is very timely. The COVID situation has brought many catastrophic and very sad events across the world. But it has highlighted for us in this community the real advantage, in fact, the absolute requirement to have remote patient monitoring in our clinical trials. Many of our companies, we've been working extraordinarily hard to keep patient visits and patient assessments running throughout the COVID situation. And depending on the disease area and the trials, that has been more or less successful. But it's clear the more we can measure in a meaningful and robust way from home, the more robust our trials will be ultimately. And I was reflecting on the 12 months that's passed since we were together at the second summit, and at least from a Roche perspective, because we're going to hear from many other companies, of course, during the course of the meeting. What has changed? What has progressed for us over the course of the last year? Well, we've actually had a number of significant readouts in rather large studies over the course of the last 12 months. And these have really demonstrated the value of digital biomarkers for decision making. So both in areas where we're trying to understand the natural history and the course of complex diseases, but also trying to make critical decisions about the progress of our molecules in clinical trials. We've, of course, generated even more evidence that are supporting our path towards formal trial endpoints. And that's still a work in progress, of course, in collaboration with the regulators. Building on the origins of a digital biomarker we've presented in the past, so-called floodlight in multiple sclerosis, we've actually announced recently that we're going to launch this now as a digital healthcare solution, initially to measure function, so rather similar to its digital biomarker origins. But in further phases, hopefully going on to really quantify disease progression and then ultimately to predict disease progression. That would be the ultimate goal of that solution. So really big progress there. We've expanded our portfolio of digital therapeutics as well within the company, and we're entering a number of different interesting areas such as exergaming. And we've seen from the whole community, even very recent approvals as well for games as therapeutics. And I'm sure many of you have seen the news there. And then finally, and I think this is really pertinent to this discussion of the summit, we have entered into a number of new industry collaborations, even with what we would traditionally think of as competitors, into this truly sort of cooperation kind of status where we can collaborate on the digital biomarkers, even if our molecules ultimately are going to compete for the same market. And I guess the final reflection I have as we kick off is just generally the infrastructure behind has progressed remarkably over the course of the last year. So if we look at machine learning and deep learning and the many different use cases, even well beyond digital biomarkers that have progressed, many publications in the clinical trial space, I'm thinking now. And these are also fueling our abilities to analyze and to use clinical digital biomarker data in the clinic for classification, for prediction, and so on. So with that, I really am excited and curious as well to join the summit with you and to learn from our contributors and to join in with the discussion. So I do wish you an enjoyable event, even if it's virtual. And as Christian said, please do join the discussion through the POLEV, through other means as much as possible, so that this is really a live event as much as we can. And with that, it's my pleasure to welcome the panel. So to welcome Christian back, but to I don't know exactly physically how it's going to happen on the screen, but our keynote panel. So Ray, Michelle, and Shibeshih, as well as Christian. And we're going to just have a few minutes, I guess, around 15 minutes or so, to discuss the state of digital biomarkers today to bring us into the summit. So, guys, I hope you can all speak and you're here online. So maybe I'll just double check. So, Ray, are you there? And Michelle? And Shibeshih? Okay, let's give our technical folks behind the scenes a little time. I can see Christian's still here, so
exactly, and you can still hear me, I hope.
No, I think you can hear me.
You're perfectly on time.
You can hear me now, I think.
Ray, yes.
That's great.
Great hearing you.
Great to see you, Christian. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thanks for joining.
So what I thought I'd do, I'll just ask a very open question to each of the panel members to start with. So I'm curious to hear, where do you see the field of digital biomarkers today, and perhaps maybe what's the one biggest advance that you've appreciated or seen over the course of the last 12 months? And let me go first to Ray.
So first of all, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you to Christian and Roche for the opportunity to participate. Every time I join these things, I like looking into the future. And so if you think about what we've had in the last 3 months, is we've had the biggest transformation in healthcare delivery in the past 3 decades. We've gone from telemedicine being less than 1% of the market to the dominant means of providing care to up to 60% in our medical center at the University of Rochester. 60% of visits were by telemedicine, when a month earlier, less than 1%. So that was a big transformation in healthcare delivery. And I think we're in the midst of seeing the biggest transformation in clinical trials. That's going to happen, and it's going to play out. I'm a little surprised it hasn't played out already. I think it's going to play out very quickly in the next 2 to 3 months, when people realize that there is no other option. There's a huge forcing mechanism. It wasn't like something got really good in telemedicine. It wasn't like we got a really good technology. It wasn't there was this great trial that showed this evidence. There was no other option. And I think we're going to have no other option in clinical trials but to do 2 things. One is decentralized trials just like this, where we see research participants in their communities. We bring research studies to them, just like we bring care to them with telemedicine. And second, we're going to get objective real world outcome measures that happen. So I don't think it has anything to do with technology. I think it has everything to do with sociology, and that the sooner people realize that this is the future, this is where the puck is going, the sooner we can all embrace it and actually design more efficient and more effective clinical trials.
Great, thanks, Ray. It's great to have that perspective. Michelle, are we able to hear you?
Bryn, thank you, Christian, for inviting me. Thank you for this opportunity to be part of this panel. It's really an honor. So in my view, I've been in this field for quite many years, and I was really thrilled to see the progression that industry has made so far. I think the technology continue to evolve. What I see is next generation of technology, the sensors, combine multiple sensors together to provide much more accurate measurement. It has come on the market. So I would, hopefully to see, before I retire, we will be able to observe some drug development with a novel digital endpoint evidence as part of our label claim. And then we can really push these kind of technology into the real world effectiveness trials, because this really enable us to measure the real world effectiveness in a much more cost efficient manner and also less burden on the patient side. So I really think that the whole COVID challenge had kind of make our digital community become stronger and it accelerated our pace a bit. And so I'm hoping that we can continue on this momentum moving things forward.
Fantastic. Thanks, Michelle. And Shibi, I can see you, so hopefully we can hear you as well.
Good afternoon, Bryn, and thanks for being invited here. That's a formidable place, and thanks, Christian, for spearheading this effort. I would say for me, I'm an MS clinical developer, so I think the most fascinating aspect of the recent development is that I think it becomes a reality to truly integrate digital technologies into clinical trials, and in particular early clinical phase trials. And I think MS is a very special place for future development of those instruments, because I think that it has become a prerequisite for the next generation of disease modifying treatments. We have a double-digit number of therapies in MS that are modifying the disease, but none of them is stopping progression. They're not even coming close to stopping progression, probably because indeed the true chronic aspect of the pathology is incredibly slow. So the actual amount of change that we have to capture within a 2-year time frame is probably too low to be conventionally measured. And I think what's changed in the field of MS is that I think the candidate digital biomarkers now will probably have a better quality of ground truth to capture the pathological reality, because imaging has also tremendously progressed. We now have using AI-based methodologies, in particular, the capacity to capture imaging signature of progression, which is probably a necessary condition to develop biomarkers from digital instrument that will measure what flies under the radar of the conventional in-clinic standards. So we will have a better quality of ground truth for all of the upcoming phase 2 and 3 experiments that will incorporate those technologies.
Wonderful. Yeah, thanks, Shibi. Really great points there. And Christian, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, Bryn. Reflecting on exactly that question, right? What should I highlight to the community here? I was thinking maybe it sounds a bit boring, but it's still very, very important. And this is that the fact that the organization has matured substantially over the last year was for me really, if you want, so the highlight. The existing assessment suites, the existing technology, the existing setups with study teams have really matured to the extent that people move from, oh, can we actually do this at all, to, oh, actually, where's the SOP for this piece of work? Right, and as much as that sounds for somebody who's more on the innovation side as something worrying, it truly shows to me that we have arrived at a stage where these digital technologies are really taken serious as other parts in the toolbox that allow us to qualify and quantify disease progression. And so at Roche, we really started off first with the low-hanging fruits, right, where you have a good starting point. We showed a couple of first good success stories there, but now what you really see is people take this forward in their thinking. And in the beginning, you really had to reach out to literally nobody to make them interested in a promising field that potentially may result in something meaningful. And now it's rather that these functions that are contributing to our normal drug development, rather than that you have to engage them, they are engaging you early on and tell you, well, you shouldn't do this, or you should do it that way, right? Which also means there's a lot of cultural change now happening at Roche, and lots of change management comes in now in this bi-directional setup. So for me, really, this maturation is the key thing, and kind of so we picked this also up as a central goal for this year in our team. really adjust here our flight level and yeah, become a normal measurement team across well, the entire value chain of drug development. That's, I think, really the key thing for me that is just currently happening. And it's really different from last year, where it was still a bit an outlier.
Thanks, Christian. Super progress. I think there's time to go around the panel one more time, just briefly, and maybe I ask you each to highlight perhaps, and because this summit is all about collaboration, maybe your best example of a collaboration that you've seen, and perhaps something around roadblocks, maybe, you know, something that we should be thinking about addressing during the course of this this discussion that you think is still holding us back as a community from really collaborating and moving the field forward. So to make it really simple, I'll just go in the same order. So Ray, maybe you kick us off.
Time to think. So I'll highlight a collaboration that we're doing with 23andMe. That's in a study that's funded by NIH, National Institutes of Health. So we're following individuals who carry a genetic mutation that puts them at high risk for Parkinson's disease. The genetic mutation is called LARC2. And we're following about 250 people who have carry that mutation, had done direct consumer genetic testing with 23andMe, therefore, and they've signed up to participate in research. And some of them have Parkinson's, but most of them don't. And we've done a completely decentralized study in which we've enrolled 250 people with this genetic mutation in less than a year from 40 different states throughout the US, and it's all done through our Center for Health and Technology at the University of Rochester. And actually in the last 2 months, in the setting of COVID, our enrollment accelerated. We had 60 enrollments in the 2 peak months during March or April and May, when COVID was most affecting at least the United States. So I think it shows that while 99% of clinical research studies were paused, halted, disrupted, that this new way of conducting research with a technology firm funded by NIH with an academic collaborator can actually accelerate during this. I think it just speaks to that most people with these diseases want to participate in research. They want to be able to find new therapies. They're eager for Roche to develop a treatment to be a LARC2 inhibitor or treat this genetic subtype of Parkinson's disease. And there are academic collaborators at our University of Rochester that are eager to adopt these new ways of conducting clinical research and clinical trials going forward.
Okay. Thanks, Ray. And Michelle.
Hi, Bryn. So my experience, and I'm also a strong advocate for Transcelerate. So I have this privilege of being part of Transcelerate and leading the novel digital endpoint team for a couple of years now. That team, because we have about 20 pharma companies as part of it, and everyone has a lot of belief and strong belief in the novel digital endpoint development as part of medicine development process. So I think the team worked together and learned together, grow together. That was an incredible collaborative experience for me. We basically, there's a lot of ambiguity in this development process, and there's no clear guidance from the regulators. So we took the approach and learned about the drug development tool qualification program that published by FDA, and really mapped that onto the IND pathway. So people can have the options, not only pursue the DDT qualification process, but also can apply that process and the requirements in the R&D process. And so I thought that was incredible. And then recently we started to publicly share some of the endpoints that individual companies are developing. And so one thing about Transcelerate is you can actually leverage that shared learning environment, and people feel comfortable share like what they are developing. So several companies that came out and said, no, they're developing nocturnal scratch specific for atopic derm indications. And so I think one of the speakers today is also part of the Transcelerate membership, will be going to some details. And that is incredible opportunity for other companies that's still trying to figure it out, can learn from each other and possibly, like you said, we're competing on the molecule itself and competing potentially in the market in the future. But that endpoint measurement needs regulatory acceptance. And so I think people are willing to share that learning, share that their growth journey is really incredible. And then a final point I want to mention is the team right now is trying to also develop a manuscript specifically describe the development of sleep as endpoint. I think sleep touch upon many, many indications. And I think that would be incredible if we can actually get that manuscript published and then follow and then with a description of the drug development qualification process as kind of the backbone. I think that would be very helpful for the industry as well. So I know that's kind of my experience with Transcelery.
Thanks, Michelle. I think it will be Pfizer, I think, presenting that use case later on this in the meeting. And maybe just, Shibeshih, you have maybe 1 minute. Let's come to you. What's been your best example of collaboration that you've seen?
I would immediately say, since the clock is ticking for the development of anti-progressive treatment in MS, that the good news is that the pre-competitive collaboration is happening, I think, now between the MS industry stakeholders. We have closely resembling technologies. We're talking to each other. I think hopefully soon we will truly secure a pre-competitive scientific agreements, so that indeed we ask the same research question to separate data set and to some extent are computing digital features in a similar way. I'm strongly advocating for the whole MS industry to get together to the ultimate point to sort of avoid replicating the historical issues of MRI solution development, so that at the end we don't multiply the standard and actually process the raw digital sensor data using identical pipeline. I think eventually pre-competitive collaboration will truly accelerate the overarching agenda of everybody, only if we get the actual sharing up until the point of actually having the same code source. So I think it is a long journey because we all have closely related solutions. But if really we want to get together to endpoints that we make decision upon in the next 2 to 5 years, I think pre-competitive collaboration is key, and I think it's happening.
Super, thanks, Shibeshih. Now, Christian, I know we're 2 minutes into the micro break, so I'm gonna, as I hand to you, give you the choice. You could either send us straight to the break or you could add your comments. But maybe before I do that, I'll take the liberty. So just what we've heard as we go into the summit now is really some big topics, from the obvious, like technology, like AI and so on. Collaboration, clearly a huge, huge area. But I think Ray particularly pointed to these societal and cultural changes, particularly this last few months, have really been accelerating and spotlighting the importance of digital medicine. So I hope that will come out during the course of the discussion. But Christian, I don't want to take any more time. I'll hand back to you.